All right, so can you just give me a quick summary of your background? I know you're a teacher and a superintendent of a former school district, but, just a little bit more detail.
So I was a high school science teacher. I taught biology and chemistry, advanced biology. Then I became a high school principal. And then I was in 2 different schools as a high school principal, and then I wanted to get experience in a larger district. So one of my sort of colleagues I went to Drake University and got my doctorate there. So one of the colleagues in my class actually needed an associate principal, so I went and worked there so that I could have some larger district experience. And then I became the executive director of high schools in Des Moines Independent School District, which is about 33,000 students or so. And then we had a switch of superintendents, and so the new superintendent did a reorganization, and I became the associate superintendent, one of the associate superintendents there. And then I went on to be the superintendent in Tucson Unified School District in Arizona, and then I came to Douglas County.
Very nice.
All right.
So what have been some of your biggest changes and challenges that you faced as a superintendent?
One of the biggest challenges, frankly, is about the time I was coming in to be a superintendent is when the recession really hit the country. And so it had a really big impact on school districts everywhere. So I was in Tucson at the time, and we were already very, very low funded. Arizona doesn't fund education very well, and then to have that funding drop even further was a big challenge. At the same time, my district was a federal desegregation district, meaning we had a desegregation order that required us to force bus kids. We were trying to get out from under that, didn't feel like it was best. We were cutting budgets dramatically. We had overcapacity in some of our schools. And it was interesting because in 2006, before I got to Tucson, they tried to close some schools to become more efficient as a district. And didn't go very well. And so then when I was there and we were faced with these really difficult budget situations, the board was saying, should we be thinking about this again, even though it didn't go very well? And I said, let's try a different approach. And so we put together what we call a merger incentive. And we actually incentivized schools that wanted to come together and merge. And we had financial incentives and some capital incentives. And it just became a win-win. So I'll kind of never forget my first sort of moment as a superintendent where, these parents come to the board and they say, please close Wrightstown so we can merge with Henry. And, just a few years prior, the room was filled with people. I'd seen pictures saying, don't close our school, don't close our school. And here are these parents saying, please, with the leadership, please close our school so we can merge and become the school with Henry. And the next morning, the Arizona Daily Star, which was the newspaper, said, board votes 5-0 to close Wrightstown. Parents are pleased. I mean, something that we never thought was possible. So those were some challenges there. And, every district is really different. And so as a superintendent, it's important that you get to know your district, you get to know your board, and you sort of put your skills, you let them morph into the needs of your place. So I did that in Tucson, and then when I came here, completely different district, right?
Yes.
Not urban, not declining enrollment, not federal desegregation, but the recession was here as well. Mm-hmm. And we were just coming out of a failed bond in 2008, massive budget cuts in the district, and we were really headed into the worst part of it. So the whole piece of balancing and creating a good budget that we would keep the district not only solvent, but moving in the right direction was quite a big challenge. And then, there are always challenges from there because you have an elected board as a superintendent, and there are 7 of them here, and they're my bosses. I have 7 bosses, and they speak with one voice as the board, and they kind of set the direction of the district. And then as superintendents, what you do is you give them advice based on your professional expertise, and you try to guide that a little bit. But ultimately, you implement, the direction that they want, and if you feel like you just can't because your values don't match or whatever, and then superintendents, they switch because of those kind of things. But so there's a lot of challenges with that scenario. Mm-hmm. Another challenging thing has been, when I came in, Senate Bill 191 had just passed, and that's the Colorado law that required our teacher evaluation systems to change dramatically. Which was the timeline was really fast, much faster than I would recommend implementing something. And we had certain parameters we had to meet. And it was, and we're just coming out of a 4-year pay freeze. It just really felt like a lot of heavy stuff all at once.
Oh, okay. All right. So when it comes to teacher attrition, I was just a little confused. Why do we hear that teachers are leaving at a higher rate in surrounding districts, but like you've said in the past, attrition rates in the county are actually average? You know, I've seen some teachers leave because of frustration in the district. But I know that some of those teachers left because of retirement and other issues. So who do we believe necessarily?
Well, I think that the best thing to do in a conversation like this is really to get the facts, because for the past 3 years we've done an annual update to the board regarding, you know, what is our turnover, and then we dig into the turnover and we will say this percentage of people retired, this percentage of people moved, this percentage of people left for what they deemed personal reasons, these people went to another district. So we lay all of that out to really help the board and community understand the turnover rate. And so the important piece of this is to understand why people leave. And that's what we really look at.
Okay. So out of those 33, would you say that number accurately like describes, you know, what the protesters were talking about yesterday? So would you say that those 33 teachers, all of them, left because of the district, or would you?
Well, I actually asked HR for those data yesterday, I believe it was, just so I could be familiar with, you know, the reason codes. I mean, I think it's important to also know that we have 8,000 employees about, and we have 3,400 plus teachers about. And so I'm one person, so I don't have all of the data for every school memorized or anything like that. But when principals and stuff come forward and say, I'm concerned about this, my whole team jumps to support. I mean, that's our role. So I asked HR for the data for Ponderosa for the last few years, and there were a number of retirements in those data. There were a number of people who moved. I didn't count them up, but and there were some people who went to other districts for what they deemed as personal reasons. So I think we could assume that a lot of those are probably people who didn't prefer the direction that the district had taken under the board and under the leadership for the last several years. Some of those people went on to job promotions in other districts, which we, you know, don't begrudge people for that. If you want to become a dean and the opportunity is in another district, we understand. And so there's a lot of information there, and I would say that, you know, it's not all. I will tell you this for sure. It's definitely not all kind of under the heading of we don't like the district and we're all leaving.
Yeah, because I had 2 teachers that I thought just retired. You know, there was no frustration with the district.
Right.
And so that's why I didn't think that number was correct, but I wasn't 100% sure. All right, so on the topic of merit pay, you know, to me, like, is it working technically? Like, is it in place, or, you know, why wouldn't the teachers all be on board about this? Because I heard that a lot of teachers aren't on board, and I don't understand why. Because you would think that it would almost give an incentive to be the best teacher you can be. So then you would get, you know, bonuses and raises and that kind of stuff. So could you explain a little more about that?
Sure. So education has a long history of using a salary schedule. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Okay, so years of service, degrees, okay? And a lot of people who go into education like that, because you can see if I have a master's degree and I work for 20 years, this is how much money I'll be making, and then I can look at para and I know what percentage of that I'll get when I retire, so it feels very dependable. The problem with it, though, is when you're in a low resource environment like we are. So Douglas County, this isn't often well known, is one of the lowest funded districts on the Front Range. People like to compare us to Cherry Creek, and the superintendent at Cherry Creek and I kind of joke around about that, but just using that example, and I could use any of the others, but using that example, Cherry Creek receives a lot more money than we do per student with their mill levy override and their per pupil funding. If we had their funding and we took that times our students, the difference for us would be about $107 million.
Wow.
So when you're in a low resource environment like we are, you have to be really efficient and smart with your dollars, because we want to compete and have the best teachers here. We know that's really important for students. And yet we don't have the same resource level. So to do that, we have had to use some different kind of pay structures. And one is market-based pay, where we had a really hard time 3 or 4 years ago getting special education teachers in the district, getting enough nurses in the district, and it was because the pay was so low in comparison to like what nurses could make somewhere else. And so we've always had a hard to fill category though in the district. It's just we felt that it wasn't as transparent as it needed to be because it was kind of vague. You know, are you hard to fill? Are you not? What does that mean? So we really wanted to make it really clear. So we created market pay bands based on supply and demand of the market. So people that are really hard to get, they start at a higher salary. People that are less hard to get start at a lower salary. But from there, we put their raises in their hands. So then if you're really, so you come in at whatever that salary is. Then, because we have to attract the best in every category. Then if you're really amazing with kids, your raise will be higher, which will, even if you come in a little bit less, you'll jump up much faster than you would in a district where everybody gets the same. So that's been a really big cultural shift though, because a lot of people, not everyone by the way, I mean I talk with teachers all over the district, and there are teachers who have done really well in that system. They are very high performing teachers, and their raises have been significant, and their salaries are now significant. We constantly look at data, because if what we're doing is bad, we want to fix it. So we looked at the top 10, for instance, teachers in the district, you know, and a number of those are over $90,000 a year. In most districts, you're capped out before that. You can't do that. So they're highly effective teachers. They're really good with kids. So there's a lot of opportunity in this, but it is a big cultural shift, and it feels uncertain to people. And because of that, I think it creates anxiety, which often manifests itself into a bit of anger. And it's true that the evaluation system changing at the same time probably was a lot for people to take on, but we're really just trying to meet the requirements of the state and do what's best for students.
Are those teachers that are the top 10, what subjects are they? Are they like core teachers or?
Yeah, well, I don't have them all memorized, but I will tell you that we were looking to make sure that people in what we call Band 1 were not being stifled by the system, and so there is, in the top 10, there's a social studies teacher, there's a PE teacher. I know that for sure. I can't recite the other ones, but.
Okay. So what would you say to the art and PE, like you said, and band teachers that feel like they're being judged for their test scores in other classes that aren't even what they teach?
We don't use test scores to evaluate teachers. The state does, but the district doesn't.
Okay.
That's part of that law that changed. The state requires test scores to be part of it, but we've allowed teachers in our district. So some districts said, well, we're just going to use PARC. But we said, you're welcome to use any assessments that you choose. You have to have a slice of standardized tests because that's the law. But beyond that, you can use whatever you want.
So none of teachers pay results from the test scores?
None.
Okay.
No teacher pay results from test scores.
That's a very common belief in Ponderosa.
Really?
It's very common.
No, we don't use, so there's 6 standards in teacher evaluations, and standard 6 is the test score standard, and we don't use it for our evaluation system.
So what are the 5 standards then?
What are the other 5? 1 is teaching the curriculum, 2 is measuring the curriculum, like assessments, 3 is teaching the curriculum well, 4 is a good culture and climate in your classroom, and 5 is professionalism and growth.
Okay.
All right. So, do you believe that political charged and polarized climate we see in the national levels applies here? In other words, do you ever expect the opposition to give you a chance to negotiate and compromise on issues of disagreement, and vice versa?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think that the reason I can be a superintendent is because I'm very optimistic, and I believe in the best in people. And so I think that there is misinformation, like you guys are saying, and I think that the more we can work to sort of work through the misinformation and get accurate information and then have dialogue around that, the more successful we'll all be. I and every member of my team are very open to working together with anyone who has questions or concerns. I answer 100% of my own email. I mean, you emailed me, right?
Yeah, I did.
I return my own calls unless they call me and it's really somebody else, like transportation or whatever. I'll meet with anyone. I mean, I've never turned down a meeting.
Yeah.
So every member of my team and myself are completely open door to work with anyone. I mean, I invite people to come into my office and go, this is the stupidest idea you've ever had. I'm fine with that. I want that. My team acts like that. We have really honest conversations with one another. We do attack issues. We don't attack people. And I think that's an important difference. And so we want that dialogue. We hope for that dialogue because I do believe we can come to a good place.
Right.
Why do you think that the protesters declined your option to give them a public forum?
Well, the reason that they said was that they wanted to collect information from the group before meeting with me.
Okay.
All right. So like you said before, a lot of people compare, DCSD and Cherry Creek,
They do.
Like what is Cherry Creek doing that necessarily we aren't?
Well, I think that they're very different districts. I also think that sometimes our perceptions from the outside of places are different than actually being in them. So I haven't worked in Cherry Creek. I don't know intimately the way that Cherry Creek works. There are people in the district that have worked in both places, and they say that they're different. Douglas County is more site-based, meaning that principals and leadership teams at sites have a lot of discretion on their budgets, on their hiring. Teachers have a lot of discretion on the way that they teach things. So in some districts, they say, here's your book, and this is what we want you to do, and here's the workbook, and we expect you to do this. In our district, it's much more open-ended. So they're just different places. One is more centralized, and one is more decentralized. And if your preference is to be given very structured experience, you might prefer Cherry Creek as a teacher or administrator, whatever. There's actually been teachers that have left the district and come back because they said, I didn't realize how much freedom and opportunity we have to be professionals in Douglas County until I went to a place that was different. And I'm not saying one is bad and one is good, it's just this is what I prefer. So, but we do get compared a lot, and like I said, we embrace it, we joke about it, but we also recognize, and this is what all of the superintendents talk about consistently, is each one of us knows our own district the best, and we make decisions based on the needs of our community. And so one is not better than the other, it's just aligned to our boards, our communities, our schools, our students.
All right. So, do you believe when students or parents, when they protested, they fully understand the budget constraints or the allocations of money? Do you believe you understand or are willing to sympathize with teachers and students on the matters of teacher pay?
So the first question was, do I think the protesters understood everything?
Yeah, do you think that they're educated about, your budget? And like you told me, how Cherry Creek gets more money than we do, and necessarily you can't compare us on that because they get more money.
Right. I'm not sure. I think that there were a number of people, and there's probably varying degrees of research and understanding on the topics. And so, in this day and age, one of the most challenging things is to navigate the massive amount of information, social media, TV media. I mean, it's endless almost. And so I do think that's a challenge for all of us in this particular moment of time. So I don't know. But I always consistently encourage people, media doesn't always use this clip, but
yes.
to say, just please make sure that you're getting the facts. We're really happy to help you do that. And then we're happy to have a conversation about what's real, So I don't know about that. And then your second question was
do you believe you understand or are willing to sympathize with teachers and students on the matter of teacher pay?
Of course. I mean, I was a teacher. I joke with my team sometimes when we're talking about benefit changes and things, because not all of my team were teachers. And I've said things like, I don't think you realize what it's like to choose between a microwave and a vacuum cleaner. But I do. I remember. I'm very passionate about us doing a really good job centrally to do the very best we can for people who are making on the lower ends of salaries, including bus drivers, including custodians. There's a lot of people in our system. And I think we need to pay a lot of attention to that, which is why when I came, a lot of people were unhappy about the benefit plan we offered, the healthcare plan. And I literally had teachers walk up and say, I'm afraid to go to the doctor. If they hand me this big bill, I can't pay it. And so we immediately, when I hired a new CFO, we immediately put into place some other healthcare options so people didn't have that fear. We've worked really hard to not raise those rates. We've worked really hard to make sure that we're taking care of people the best we can within our means. So I do sympathize on all those topics and want to talk about pluses and minuses. And I think I have a lot of information on the topic.
All right. So I think everybody agrees that teachers should get paid a lot more, especially the good ones. Do you think it's possible to, think of almost new ways to hire their salary? If that's from creating a GoFundMe page, to, almost doing teacher scholarships in a way.
Well, I believe teaching is a profession, and so I'm open to anything, but I believe that districts need to do what they can to fully fund teachers as professionals. And GoFundMe pages and all those things I've seen teachers use those for Lego kits and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I would be disappointed if we got to a day when we had to do that for salaries. I think that we need to think about what are the possible ways that we can continue to raise salaries. The state has given us so little money over the past few years, and we have put almost all of it into teacher salaries, not just teachers, all staff salaries, because we want to raise salaries and we want to do it quickly. But, for instance, we were looking at some data the other day, and like a $12,000 raise for every teacher in our district would cost us $48 million.
Wow.
I think that sometimes it's not understood the way that it works out, because we have salary, but then you have para, which is the retirement system, which is going up every year. We pay in a higher percentage, which is fine, but it costs money, $2 million a year, every year more. And then we have benefits, and so we have to look at the whole piece. So a $12,000 raise, we were just looking at kind of what would this do? What would this do? $48 million with benefits.
Wow, that's a lot. So in a lot of your past interviews I've listened to, you talk about stakeholders, and how do they impact your decision, and necessarily what are they?
So when you are a superintendent, you have a huge amount of stakeholders. So you have students, mm-hmm. you have parents, you have staff members, you have community members. Board members are kind of community members, sometimes parents, they vary, but they're a unique group. So then you have staff, support staff. So there's all of these people. And so one of the things that I try to do, I'm from a small town in southern Iowa. Like, I'm from a town where nobody ever left school because, Mary Murphy at the Come and Go would call your mom and tell you to get back to school. So everybody knew everybody. And one of the and I believe relationships are important to leadership. One of the challenges of large districts is it's difficult to form relationships with 8,000 staff members. Yeah. And then you have 350,000 community members. So I try to really be strategic about that, spending time. I have a teacher advisory. Any teacher in the district is welcome to join it. I have a support staff advisory. Again, any support staff classified person in the district is welcome to join. We added principal advisories this year. I didn't want to add another meeting for them, but they wanted to do it, so we did. And then beyond that, I present to like the Kiwanis and the Rotary and all these groups where I try to touch base with folks in the community. Douglas County is kind of transient a little bit. We have a lot of people that move in. We have some people that move out, and that makes it even more challenging to establish relationships. So this is always a work in progress. There's no question. But stakeholders are really important to the work that I do.
Right. And then finally, looking back, do you think that there's anything that you could have done to communicate your ideas better, dealing with this protest and everything that's gone on?
Oh, always, right? I think that the improvement in communication is like an infinite continuum, right? You could always do something more. I feel like we try really hard to use 100 different strategies: Twitter, Facebook, website, email, newsletters, radio shows, TV shows. We really do try hard to communicate ideas, but misinformation sometimes gets legs. And then you spend, I think, maybe 10 times the amount trying to correct that as you do the original communication. So it's just an ongoing challenge, and we're always trying to think of new ways to do a better job, and we're going to continue to work on that.
Why are people calling for your job specifically, do you think? Not just they're pissed at the district, but why are they saying Fagen needs to go?
There's probably 100 different reasons why people say that. Most of the people that say those things have, and I've met some of them, but a lot of them have never spoken with me before, and I would just hope that they would, at least before I would call for somebody's position, I'm a parent in the district. Yeah. This is my career. I'm not a politician. I don't run for office. This is my profession. This is what I do. I take it very seriously, very personally. It's very important to me. And so I would hope that we would get to a place in our culture and climate that is healthy, where we at least get to know people before we use some of those strategies. But that hasn't always been the case.
Cool.
Yeah, I think media has definitely confused a lot of the kids in Ponderosa, because once one almost went with the petition, the whole student body was behind them, and there was a lot of kids who were against the protest, like me. Like, I went on the news last night and I said I was against it, and I got messages from that, all from the student body saying that they were against it too, and they were glad that somebody else spoke out for that. So I don't think it's necessarily this whole protest. I just think when one signs it, they all sign it. So
yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I think you should be really proud of yourself. I just want to say, because I know how difficult it is to take a position that may not be the popular position. You didn't know, right?
Yeah.
But to take the position that you believe in your heart is the right one, and there in this day and age, that's challenging. I mean, it's no longer just like a playground situation where you have. I mean, it spreads like wildfire through social media, and I understand that. So I think that not because you had a certain position, but I really, it makes me hopeful that we can have dialogue and people from different positions can feel comfortable to say, I hear what you're saying, but here's what I think. And I think that once we get to that space where both sides feel comfortable talking, we'll be in a lot better place in a school and a district, and even beyond in our community.
Have you been on the protest page, the website that the petition was?
Yeah, I've seen it because I knew I was going to get questions about what it was about. So but it has changed a little bit now and again.
Have you read through the comments at all?
No.
So a lot of the comments are just really negative, and they don't give you a chance to respond or anything. So what is it like to not be able to really respond to all? There's thousands of people on there calling out the district and stuff.
Right. What is that like?
Yeah.
I think that I think it's expected to have people have opinions that might be different, and I always want to try to meet people's concerns or needs. I mean, in my previous positions, I just, when there was somebody who didn't understand or was against whatever, I just wanted to sit down and talk about it and understand that we may not come to the same spot, but at least we would know each other, right? Because I think that it's a different world when you don't have to look in a person's eyes and say those things or do those things. So I think that's a challenge for people like me, but I think you have to recognize that that's kind of the world we're in right now, where there's a lot of online stuff, and it's going to be there. And I just hope, one person said to me recently, I think that we all experience this in our own way, and so don't underestimate the intelligence of the greater community to know that you haven't had a chance to talk with these people, or they don't know you, or whatever. So I think that it's challenging. It used to be more difficult, but as you go on in time, this is my 8th year as a superintendent, so I think as you go on in time, you kind of understand the lay of the land a little better, and just accept it to some extent, that you can only control what's in your circle of influence, right? And hope that as more people like you have a little more information and start taking a role, that we'll be able to have a greater impact on that conversation.